Good morning. Welcome to the Rotary Club of Hudson. My name is Marilyn Orr, President of the club, and we are thrilled to have you join us today. This meeting broadcast is available on HCTV, as well as our Rotary of Hudson YouTube channel and Facebook. Our club meets weekly using this digital platform, Zoom. When we meet in person, it's at Laurel Lake Retirement Community for breakfast. We hope to get back to that soon. We meet most Wednesday mornings from 7:15 to 8:30 a.m. So come out to join us for a meeting. We would love to have you as a guest. To learn more about Rotary, our club, and the impact we are having on our local community and the world, please visit our website, rotaryhudson.org. So enjoy this meeting today and help us share the message that Rotary opens doors of opportunity.
And we're ready to go.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Rotary Club of Hudson. I'm Ron Strobel, the Sergeant at Arms. Welcome to this very dark morning. I guess it'll be lighter next week. Our invocation this morning is by Phil Herman.
Good morning. Let's pray. God, thank you this morning for my fellow Rotarians and our guests on this call. Thank you for their hearts of service and the impact that they continue to have in our community and in our schools. Thank you for the technology that enables us to come together this morning. God, we're tired. We're tired when it comes to this pandemic. It's hard to have patience and believe that this too shall pass. And as we're waiting for this storm to pass, and as we head into the month of November, God, please help us in this month where we come together to give thanks, to take the time to remember each day that in spite of this storm, we have so much to give thanks for. Help us to use gratitude to lift our own spirits, and help us to use gratitude in this coming month to share joy and lift the spirits of those around us so that we may help them get through this storm as well. Together we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Phil. And to lead us in the pledge and the four-way test, George Snyder.
Good morning, Rotarians, and welcome guests. The pledge, if you don't know it, was first adopted in 1892, has gone through several iterations over the years, most recently in 1954 when Congress added the words "under God." If you would now join me from your homes as I say the pledge, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And the Rotary four-way test of the things we think, say, and do, which I would urge everybody to reflect on as we approach the election next week. First, is it the truth? Second, is it fair to all concerned? Third, will it build goodwill and better friendships? And fourth, will it be beneficial to all concerned?
Thank you, George. And now our president, Marilyn Orr.
Good morning, Rotarians. I am very saddened to report that Jan Ahern, the wife of Rotarian Jim Ahern, peacefully passed away on Monday, October 26th. In his communication with me, Jim has indicated that the service would be private with no calling hours. COVID has definitely put an impact on everything we do. Jan was a gracious and loving wife, mother, and grandmother, and our deepest sympathies are extended to him and his family. I'd also like to welcome the newest member of our Rotary Club of Hudson, Peter Spacagna. We'll be having an interview session with our new members on November 18th, so look forward to that. The Strategic Planning Committee is putting together a survey. They have been meeting diligently over these past few months and coming to some very serious conclusions. And now it's time for us to talk more openly with the club, and we'd like everyone to participate. Remember that this Rotary Club is a club of the members, for the members, and by the members. Lastly, This is now the end of October and we're coming into our fall fundraiser. You will be receiving a flyer very soon talking about our scholarship drive. In the past, we have had a rose and popcorn sale headed by our own past president, Tom Page. Earlier in the fall, Tom had expressed concerns about having a sale such as this during this time. And the board decided at our last meeting that that is not what we would do. We want to protect the health and safety of our students as well as our members. And so we're urging all members to participate. You'll be receiving this via email very soon. But today concludes our candidate forum. And again, David Basil has done a wonderful job of contacting today's speaker and coordinating her appearance. David, please introduce our speaker today.
Thank you, President Marilyn. Well, good morning, fellow Rotarians and guests. I will take just a second and say it's a very good morning for all true Blue Dodgers fans. And with that, I would like to take this opportunity to introduce Hillary O'Connor Mueri, the Democratic candidate for the congressional seat of the 14th District of Ohio. It is my distinct honor and privilege to introduce her. She is a native of Ohio. Her mother was a teacher and her father was a welder and UAW member. She studied aviation engineering at The Ohio State University. After Ohio State, she joined the Navy, entered flight school in 1999, and flew Tomcats in 12 combat missions over Iraq. She has also flown the F-14, F/A-18, and F-16. Following her military career, Ms. Mueri earned her law degree from the University of San Diego. After that, she practiced law with a firm focusing on aviation accident litigation and has served as in-house legal counsel. Please join me in giving a warm Rotary welcome to Hillary O'Connor Mueri. Ms. Mueri, I'll turn the podium over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so very much for that wonderful introduction and more importantly for the invitation to be here today. I'm beyond impressed with the amount of turnout here and the amount of people that are just interested in participating so strongly in the democracy that you're willing to get up at the crack of not even dawn yet to be here and to hear me prattle a bit. So thank you to everyone for that motivation this morning. Without ever meeting me, my grandfather taught me all that I ever needed to know about service. He had just one dream when he was growing up, and that was to pitch for the Cleveland Indians. Growing up in Parma in the 1930s, what else would he have dreamed of? And he was great. He was a pitcher so talented that the Indians actually drafted him in 1941. He got to their farm club, the Appleton Papermakers, and threw 2 no-hitters in 1942. But it was wartime and his country needed him. So my grandfather set aside his baseball career and enlisted in the Navy. By the time he got back, his shoulder wasn't the same anymore. His baseball window had closed around him. But here's the thing, he never complained about it, ever. My grandmother, who had raised their 8 kids alone after he died too young of colon cancer, said she never heard him say a harsh word about the dream that had been taken from him. And that's because he was a patriot. He placed service to his country above all else. That's what we do here in Ohio. We serve. We help our neighbors. We put our country first. You might not know this, or you might, but no state in America sent more soldiers into the Union Army during the Civil War than Ohio did. And I am very proud of that. Service and patriotism have always been in our DNA. I lived that during my 8 years of service as a naval flight officer, flying combat missions over Iraq. And I've tried to live it ever since coming home. And that is why I'm asking you for your support today. The people of Ohio taught me a lot in this year or so that I've been campaigning. You've shared with me your hopes and fears. You've told me about the issues that keep you up at night. We talked jobs, healthcare, COVID, the cost of prescription drugs, education, the environment, and the persistent fear that corruption in Washington is strangling the greatness from our country. But mostly, you've reminded me that public service in any form is both a privilege and a promise. It's a pledge to do good like my grandfather did. Now, David Joyce has been our congressman for 4 terms. That's 8 years in which we've paid his salary and given him our trust, our faith that he's going to uphold that sacred pledge between an elected official and his constituents. And he struck out. And how do we know that? It's easy. We just look at his record, his votes. While he's off enjoying the finest healthcare plan in the world, a plan that we're paying for, Dave has voted over 30 times to take our healthcare away. He voted no on providing hazard pay to essential workers during the pandemic, including members of the VA medical staff. He voted no on paid sick leave for VA medics who contract COVID-19 while on duty, no on the HEROES Act. In 2019, he voted no on the Lower Drug Costs Act. What does he vote yes on? Well, he voted yes on a tax plan that gives 83% of its benefits to the wealthiest 1% of Americans. How many of you woke up this morning thinking, gosh, I hope we can do something for the country's wealthiest 1% today? They're having such a hard time. He voted yes on weakening the EPA, yes on lowering pollution standards for the air we breathe and the waters we fish. Every time that David Joyce has to choose between the people and the powerful, he chooses the latter. And of course, there are great rewards for these kind of votes. As of the last filing in September, Dave's reelection war chest had nearly $2.8 million in it. $2.8 million. Of that sum, $1.2 million come from PACs, lobbyists for special interests. It's real estate money, banking money, the health insurance lobby, corporate money. $973,000 additional dollars come from large individual contributors. So together that means over $2.2 million in his coffers are coming from either corporate interests, special interests, or people who could buy and sell you and me. In fact, only 1.78% of his war chest comes from donations under $200. The average donation to my campaign is under $70. Which one sounds more like democracy to you? Put another way, David Joyce, if we send him back for another term, is going to return to Washington owing millions of dollars to the moneyed interests who sent him there. And don't you think that they're going to want something in return for their investment in him? Of course they will. And David will once again deliver it, because he is not really here to serve us. He's not really here to represent us. If he were, he'd stand up to his party when his party is clearly wrong. If he placed service over politics, he would have called out the leader of his party when he learned that Russia had placed bounties on the heads of US soldiers overseas and that the president knew about it and did nothing. As a combat veteran, I take that very personally. If Dave placed service over politics, he would have criticized the president upon learning that the president called Americans, men and women in uniform, losers and suckers because they fought for their country instead of finding a way not to. I take that personally too, and I know the thousands of military families in this district do as well. If Dave truly believed that it was his job to protect and defend the people of Ohio's 14th district, he would have warned us in February that COVID was deadly and highly contagious. That's when Dave, his president, and the rest of the GOP knew those facts to be true. But Dave said nothing. He just sat back and let his fellow Republican lawmakers lie to the American public about the severity and lethality of a virus that has now crippled Ohio's economy while killing roughly 227,000 of our fellow Americans. That's not service. It's political cowardice. And it has been the hallmark of Dave's 4 unremarkable terms in office. Now, I know in the past, as a prosecutor, Dave fought hard to put bad people away and to protect the public. But prosecutors aren't politicians, and DC can corrupt people. I think once Dave got elected to the House, his sole goal became staying there. And he became far more interested in the wants of lobbyists than in the needs of his people. To stay in office, Dave now sponsors or supports legislation written by the very PACs that contribute to his reelection campaigns. To stay in office, he tells lies about me rather than engaging with me about policy. To stay in office, he tries to paint himself as bipartisan while voting with Donald Trump 94% of the time. That's actually more than Jim Jordan does. And to stay in office, he allows our government to stay exactly as it is, unwieldy, unresponsive, and deaf to its own citizens. DC changed him. It made him lose sight of his mission. That's a big word with me, mission. It's a big word for anyone who's risked his or her life for this country. I think my mission is you, defending you, speaking up for you, and freeing you to build your own future. Why? Because I am you. I'm a 4th generation Ohioan, born in Parma, raised in Painesville, in a house my parents still live in today. It's 5 minutes up the road from where I'm sitting now, and my brother's family is 2 minutes on the other side of me the other way. My father, as Dave mentioned, was a UAW auto worker for over 52 years. He worked at the Coit Road Fisher Body Plant on the east side, usually taking second or third shift because those odd hours paid a bit more. Mom stayed home to raise us when we were kids and then decided service called her to be a teacher later on. Economic insecurity was part of our daily life and it shaped me. I broke my leg right before I started my freshman year at Ohio State, and the doctor came in and told me if I didn't have surgery in the morning, I might never walk right again. We couldn't have come close to paying for that, but for my dad's UAW-1 health insurance that saved us. I paid that back by studying my tail off and joining the Navy and facing enemy fire to support our troops and my fellow flyers. I also paid it back by taking on countless pro bono cases when I came home and became a lawyer, largely in helping women in their escape from domestic violence. And I'm paying it back by standing here before you today as a candidate for office. I want to serve you. The firefighters and nurses and cops risking their lives for us today, the factory workers, the grocery store workers, the veterans, teachers, the students, your parents, all of the voices who have been drowned out or paved over by the immense and revolting greed that has seized and perverted our federal government. I'm here for the people who need our country to be better, who want us to be a more perfect union. Ohioans who thought they were voting to drain the swamp in 2016, but now find themselves drowning in it. One day, Lord willing, this pandemic will end and America will truly begin the work of rebuilding. My hope is that on that day, we as a nation will have the courage to ask ourselves the hard questions. Why did we just lose so many Americans to this virus? Why was our country hit harder than any other country when we had 2 months to prepare for what we knew was coming? More broadly, why do we spend more on a healthcare system than any other nation on earth when that system fails so many people? I think when looking critically at the last 4 years, we'll also have to ask, how did we allow ourselves as Americans to be torn apart from one another on the subject of race? How did we lose pace with the rest of the world in the fight against climate chaos? Why did we not do more to protect and honor our men and women in uniform? When did we start cozying up to Russia? When did we start hating our neighbors simply because we disagreed with them on politics? And finally, where was our sole representative in Congress, David Joyce, when all of this was happening? The turbulence of the last 4 years can bring about a national conversation on who we are and what we value. If I'm in Washington, your voice will be a part of that conversation, and I think we'll get closer to that great America we all long for. That's our choice now, change or more of the same. A sense of mission or 2 more years of special interests polluting our government. Representation or politics. My name is Hillary O'Connor Mueri, and I'm ready to serve. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Ms. Mueri. Thank you very, very much. I would now like to present some of the questions that have come in via the chat feature. The first question, what will be your priorities as a member of Congress?
Absolutely. In Northeast Ohio, it is not rocket science what we need here. I studied rocket science in school. This isn't rocket science. We need to attack the failing job system here, and we need to attack the failing healthcare system here. And those things are so interrelated. I think that healthcare is a human right. We live here in the richest country on earth, and I think it's absolutely inconceivable that people are forced into bankruptcy by simple accidents and forced into extremes like insulin rationing in order to make ends meet. All Americans should be able to count on affordable, available, and quality healthcare. Further, the COVID crisis has emphasized the reality that access to healthcare is not only important for our individual well-being, but also for our community's health. It underscores our need to implement solutions that will provide universal access to quality healthcare as quickly as possible, as opposed to years in the future. We have tools today to combat the pandemic. If people could get tested without worrying about how they were going to pay for it, if they could seek treatment without worrying that they were going to lose their house over it. So in this light, I support protecting and expanding the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, and its provisions that protect our right to insurance coverage for people with pre-existing conditions, or that allow children to remain on their parents' plan until the age of 26, access to the insurance marketplaces and eliminating out-of-fee pockets for preventative medicine. Further, in pursuit of ensuring that affordable coverage, I support public option insurance. We could have a government-run health plan that competes with private insurers. It's win-win in the sense that market forces should drive down the prices for everybody, ensure better coverage, better service for everyone, regardless if they choose that public insurance or their private insurance. And finally, on that front, we need to get runaway prescription drug costs under control. We still need to provide incentive to our researchers to invest in that cutting edge medical research, but we need to do something to stop them from raking us over the coals when it comes to paying for it. I support Medicare having the ability to directly negotiate drug prices. I support legislation to eliminate pay for delay deals between drug companies and generic manufacturers. On the other side of the coin, not to steal Sherrod Brown's work, but I believe in the dignity of work. As I mentioned, I come from a working class family. I think that all work has value. As such, I believe in the minimum wage being a livable wage so that people don't have to go off to a second job and a third one and neglect their families in order to make sure that they have food on the table and a roof over their head. That wasn't the American dream that I was raised on. As the COVID pandemic has brought sharp focus to, we do need strong safety nets, social safety nets, in order to make sure that when people lose their jobs over no fault of their own and their families are facing hard times like we see all around us in our community, they have a bridge to future prosperity when the economy lets them down. I think we need to support our infrastructure, improve our roads. As everyone knows how funky our roads are these days, and we see issues with bridges collapsing across the country, and we need to stop that from happening back here. When we invest in these things, they create good paying union jobs. We also have an issue, broadband access. We see now with the COVID pandemic that broadband access is creating a system of digital haves and have-nots. When we're shifting to accessing medical services by video conference, when we're shifting to school by video conference, this is becoming a huge and urgent thing for our children and our elderly and ourselves. This ties in to another question, if you'll let me roll just a little bit here. Climate change is an issue, and it's affecting us right now in Northeast Ohio. And by investing in infrastructure, in that new green infrastructure, we can, feed two birds with one trough. That's sorry, someone yelled at me once for saying kill two birds with one stone as it was too violent. So in this case, we can affect both of these things at the same time. If we don't act soon, climate change is going to significantly damage our economy and leave us with an uncertain future for our kids and grandkids. It is hurting our economy here in Northeast Ohio in a lot of significant ways. It's affecting our agriculture through pests, drought, flooding, a lot of the new extremes that are coming up. We're seeing health issues between heat waves and flooding and disease-borne insects propagating. And we see it affecting our Great Lakes. We know how important that is to our economy here, as well as our enjoyment of this beautiful land in Northeast Ohio. Increased flooding and erosion is leading to sewage spills that causes nutrient loading and algal blooms and dead zones in the lake. It kills fish. It causes 3 feet of shorefront to erode a day during the winter because the lake doesn't freeze over anymore. That's reducing property values, reducing our tourism value. And then on the broader scheme of things, I believe our military leaders when they tell us that climate change is a national security threat. Just a couple of weeks ago, there was an article about how Naval Station Norfolk, where I was stationed, which is the largest naval base on the face of the earth, might become unusable. They need to invest millions of dollars to keep the sea level rise from affecting the piers and to make sure that it keeps the ships safe. Beyond that, climate crisis could cause more migration because people are fleeing war over resources like water or from zones where it's becoming unlivable due to the heat. Like so many things, I think that Americans, we have the ability to overcome any challenge that is put before us. I mean, we landed a man on the moon in a decade when we put our minds to it. So this can be our generation's moonshot. We have unique ingenuity in America, spirit, can-do attitude, and we can show that we're able to overcome the challenge, even when it's existential as this. We've had a lot of success in our history using policy to solve these major problems. When we work with business and markets in cooperation with our government, we can solve huge environmental issues. For example, we saw our polluted rivers as dramatized by the Cuyahoga River fire in 1969. We solved that. We cleaned that up through industry innovation and federal legislation working together. That was the Clean Water Act. We saw devastating acid rain that was solved with a market-based solution. We saw the Clean Air Act working together with industry. And then we've seen the hole in the ozone on a global level solved by an international treaty, or at least addressed to a very significant degree, and that was the Montreal Protocol. So despite the dire warnings that these problems are going to harm the economy has actually grown as these solutions were implemented. So it really, truly is win-win. So I'm going to take a breath there and let you get another question in edgewise. I appreciate you letting me go on about it. I'm very passionate about Northeast Ohio, and all of these things all come together in a very exciting way to me.
Clearly. I'm going to combine a couple of questions, and they touch on one aspect that you were just discussing, that's Lake Erie. Do you have a vision for its preservation, and how will you commit to work toward continuing its restoration and the protection of that incredible resource?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that this is one of the things that has been very, very significantly overlooked by our representative currently. And the fact of the matter is, yes, cleanup money is good. And I appreciate the fact that we do have money to clean up those algal blooms and to fight back against carp incursion and all of the rest of that. But until we address that root cause of the attacks on our lake, we're never going to see, we're just going to be sweeping the water back into the ocean. We're never going to be able to actually contain the problem. And that's where we need to address the issue of climate change. As I mentioned, it's climate change that is leading to this nutrient loading in the lake, which is causing the algal blooms and et cetera. And we need to get a handle on the pollution that is being dumped in our waters. As I mentioned earlier, we have cut funding for the EPA and EPA enforcement. And so we're seeing a lot more pollutants being dumped into our rivers and waters here in Ohio. So when we address the root cause, it's going to lead to better and more effective and more permanent solutions to protecting our lake. So yes, cleanup, but also preventing the damage in the first place is going to be absolutely imperative. I am 100% committed to continuing to fight for those monies for the cleanup, but I'm also committed to fighting to make sure that we stop it on the front end.
Okay, thank you. The next question asks for your opinions on creating and supporting green jobs and how fossil fuels fit in to that overall scheme.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, green jobs are a great way to solve a lot of our problems. So we have the ability to invest in our infrastructure. And I think that that's something that we all believe in. We all believe in the government supporting our roads and supporting our bridges. And so if we can involve ourselves in supporting the new green infrastructure, it creates jobs, and it also frees us up from our attachments to foreign resources for coal or for fuel. And it also provides us with the ability to generate our own power. And now in Texas, wind power and solar power are actually the cheapest forms of energy that we have going in the country. So the more we can expand that, we're going to be driving down our own energy costs. So I think it's worthwhile to be investing in that. And we see that across the history of our country. When our nation invested in putting a man on the moon, we saw all of that technology flow eventually to people and to industry. And we wouldn't have a computer industry now if it weren't for investments from the government in ARPA and DARPA along the way. So this is something that it requires a little bit of front-end investment, but it benefits everybody in the end. I think too that when we work together on the front of fighting climate change, we're preserving something that has actual physical value, because we know how much carbon costs and we know how much it costs to take it out of the air. And we encourage companies or require companies then to pay their fair share. So they're reaping the profits of dumping all of these pollutants into our environment. So if we make sure that they pay the costs of doing the business as well as taking the profits from it, once again, we all win. We have cleaner air to breathe. We have cleaner water to drink. And I think that benefits us across generations.
Okay. The next question goes back to COVID and asks for your suggestions on what we should do to correct it or deal with it, as opposed to what is now being done.
Yeah, there's a lot of coulda, woulda, shoulda about what policy should have been up to this point. But in the end, we can't change the past. COVID right now is the fourth largest mass casualty event in US history. It's topped only by the Civil War, World War II, and the 1918 pandemic. That's a pretty terrifying statistic to me. We saw our representative vote against expanding the ACO. We saw our representative vote against stimulus checks for people in this community. We saw him vote against housing assistance for people who might be losing their jobs. I think one of the most important things we need to do is to look at where we need to invest money now to prevent a huge economic disaster in the coming months. When people start losing their houses, we're going to see a huge issue with the housing market, and we're going to see a huge rise in the homeless level. This is something that we have the capacity and the ability to stem off right now. We need to control the outbreak as it stands right now. This means top-down leadership. It means taking the virus seriously, not calling it a hoax, not minimizing its seriousness. We need to stop turning preventative measures like mask wearing into a partisan political test. We need to be investing in science-based solutions like vaccines and treatments, as well as PPE for our frontline responders and workers. One of the important things is we need to have oversight to where these trillions of dollars of stimulus funds are going to. We all read about the example of luxury steakhouses and multi-million-dollar coal companies getting PPP funds rather than our Main Street businesses. And then our administration is making claims that the PPP saved more jobs than exist in a sector in certain circumstances. So we need an accounting of where they're spending our money. And then finally, 70% of our economy, as defined by GDP, is based on consumer spending. Circling back to what I was saying at the beginning, we need to make sure that Americans have access to the necessities of life and the ability to spend, because that is what is going to boost our economies and keep us on track until we get to the other side of this. And then in the grand scheme of things, we need long-term tax policy that favors small businesses and businesses who employ Americans as opposed to offshoring them. Our current tax program here in this country actually exempts offshore profits to a certain amount and then only charges about half of it of what American companies pay for the rest of it. So we need to reverse that and encourage our companies to keep their jobs onshore so that we don't see a continuation of this joblessness problem that has been begun by the COVID crisis extend further out.
Okay. The next question kind of segues off of your last response, and that asks, the initiatives that you've described would certainly cost money, and asks for your plans on how to pay for some of these initiatives and whether or not you would support a large tax increase.
So I think a lot of it is about where we're putting our money. We saw the largest tax decrease for wealthy Americans in history come up this term in the president's office. We saw during the COVID crisis here, our billionaires in this country add almost $1 trillion to their wealth while the rest of us are really hurting. So I think it's about targeting where we're asking for that money. And I think that Vice President Biden's plan shows us that we can accomplish a whole lot of things by increasing marginally the tax rate for people who earn over $400,000. We can see that we're accounting for all of these monies. As I said, instead of giving expensive steakhouses and coal companies PPP money, that we make sure that it goes to those economic drivers like small businesses. So the money has existed in our pool. It's just about redirecting it and reapportioning who's paying for it.
Okay. The next question, the congressional district is quite extended, and it asks where you live and if this is your first run for elected office. So if you could kind of describe maybe geographically where Painesville sits, because I know that you said that's where you live.
Yeah, I live in Painesville, which is in the middle of Lake County. I'm about 10 minutes south of the lake. This is where I grew up. I'm a graduate of Riverside High School in Painesville Township. As I mentioned, my parents live in the same house that we moved to when I was 3 years old, which is a few minutes up the road. So I did grow up in this area, and it's very familiar to me. I do have the good fortune of having extended family that lives in this area. About 90% of my family is here. As I mentioned, my mother is the oldest of 8 children, so it's quite a large family. My cousins and a couple aunts and uncles live out in Macedonia. I've got some in Cleveland and a few on the west side, but I spend kind of a good amount of time in a lot of places. But where I live is Painesville in Lake County.
Okay.
And yes, this is my first run for elected office. I know a lot of folks ask about that and wonder why, why jump in to United States Congress as a first run. But the fact of the matter is, the House of Representatives is the people's house. This was designed to be a form of government, a form of federal government that was as close to the everyday people of a district as possible. This is the only part of the government that was elected directly by the people since the founding of our country. I think that that's pretty exciting. I mean, even the senators weren't, that took a constitutional amendment to come up with. I think that being able to come into Washington, I refuse to accept corporate PAC money. I come without all of the baggage that being a career politician brings to the table. And I think that it really brings the House of Representatives back to the root of what the founders intended.
Okay, kind of a segue off of that question. You answered that you have not accepted corporate PAC money. Have you accepted any other PAC money?
Yeah, I have some PAC money from what they call leadership PACs. So for example, Sherrod Brown has a PAC he calls a Canary Fund. And so I've taken PAC money from Senator Sherrod Brown. Also a group called End Citizens United. They exist to get dark money out of politics. I've accepted money from their PAC as well.
Okay, have you held any other political roles on a local level, not necessarily even an elected office?
I have not held an elected office. I have worked with Democrats abroad when I was overseas as a volunteer, and I've worked with get out the vote efforts, but not as an official.
Okay. The next question. The Cuyahoga Valley National Park is a real treasure for the community and asks for your plan to preserve the national park system.
I have to admit, I am not well versed on what is on the table when it comes to the national park system. I do, in fact, believe that the national park system is a treasure to our country and needs significant protection and investment. We see a lot of attacks on our parks these days. We see people who want to sell off the lands or open them up to mining and logging. And I am very invested in making sure that we preserve these treasures to be public for perpetuity. So I don't have the capacity to talk about it in a detailed plan, but I do believe that it is an important issue to preserve those lands.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any other questions coming through the chat feature. I don't know if any other members have any questions or not. We'll wait a couple of minutes or a couple of seconds. Obviously, one of the flashpoints in the national political conversation seems to be the Green New Deal. Any thoughts that you could share with us on that?
So the Green New Deal, I think, has become so politicized and so contentious that it gives me pause. I have not read the complete thing. It is a significant document. I've read a lot of summaries on it. I think in the end, when we try to put too many things into one bill, we run the risk of forgetting what the point of it was and making it so it's so unwieldy. Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. To make it so unwieldy that it is impossible to accomplish in a real way. So I think by breaking it up into component parts and focusing on each of those, we have the ability to really enact that change in a pragmatic fashion. I like to look at things in a very pragmatic way. So I appreciate the fact that people want to put together very big and bold ideas, but I don't think that's the best way to get things accomplished.
Okay. The next question, and we have picked up a couple more here. We've seen another incident of a mentally ill person of color being unfortunately shot and killed by law enforcement, and asks for your suggestions on dealing with mental illness.
This goes back to the healthcare issue. When people have access to healthcare, we have a healthier society. And the fact of the matter is, mental health care is healthcare. And I think that we as a society, when we invest in people and their ability to be healthy, we're going to see a lot fewer of these issues. When we invest in our first responders, and so that they know how to respond to these issues in a compassionate and controlled fashion, we're going to see a lot fewer of these issues. I see the next question about police and safety forces. My grandfather was a police detective, and I am in support of all of the good cops out there. But we know the adage, bad apples. But the rest of that saying is one bad apple spoils the rest of the barrel. So we need to invest in our police force and their ability to excise those bad apples from their barrel, so that the good cops out there can get that training to take care of people and take care of our society in a fashion that makes us all feel safe. So it all comes back together as making sure that we have investment in mental health, but making sure that we invest in training our police forces and make sure that they have the tools that they need to help police our society and keep us safe and keep us feeling safe. I think we need to really focus on that investment of serve and protect service. It keeps coming back around to that, I think, on so many fronts. So yes, we need to invest in healthcare. We need to invest in proper training for our first responders and police forces, and make sure that they have the capacity to deal with unexpected and difficult to deal with situations.
Okay. The next question asks you to explain what kinds of incentives you would support to enable renewable energy such as solar and wind to be viable as we move into the future.
Yeah, we as a country can make smart investments with research dollars into renewable energy technologies, as well as high-tech manufacturing. And these are good jobs that are come into our community. And oh, by the way, it's going to start coming into a cycle, because when we bring those high-tech, good paying jobs and high paying businesses into our district, they're going to be adding to our tax base again. So it's going to be a very, very win-win on that front. We can give individual families rebates and incentives to help them adopt those green technologies lives. For example, energy efficient appliances, weatherization of homes, rooftop solar panels, fuel efficient electric vehicles, or just fuel efficient vehicles. All of these things over time have shown that we can affect people's interest in adopting them by having those rebates and incentives on the individual level. And then on the business front, I alluded to it, having a market-based solution to carbon issues. We can put a price on carbon. We can encourage them to invest in renewable resources for their factories and their manufacturing. So a little bit of carrot and a little bit of stick when it comes to the manufacturing side of things.
Okay. The next question asks you to state your position on gun control, including assault weapons.
Yeah, I am proudly supported as a Moms Demand Action gun sense candidate. As a combat veteran, I have seen firsthand what weapons of war do to people, and I don't think that weapons of war belong on our streets. But the fact of the matter is, this is completely in comporting with the history and the specifics of the Second Amendment. We saw in the Old West, people were required to check their weapons before coming into town. This has got a strong history. This is not, we're coming for your guns. I have used guns. I like skeet shooting. I have carried a sidearm in combat. This is not, someone asking for your pistol or asking for your hunting rifle. The most important and well-received issue that I am 100% in support of is universal background checks. This is something that 9 out of 10 Americans believe in. And the fact that we haven't been able to implement this just shows how much the dark money coming from the gun lobby is affecting our Congress. We just want to make sure that we're keeping guns out of the hands of criminals and abusers. And this is something that is not only going to keep our society safe. It's going to keep victims of domestic violence safe. And it's also going to keep our law enforcement safe by keeping guns out of the hands of criminals. Background checks should be a no-brainer, I think. When you go on to assault weapons, we saw during the 90s when the assault weapons ban was out there that it drove down the rates of violent gun crimes. So statistically, it shows it has a very, very positive effect on gun violence rates in our society. Once again, it keeps us safe and it keeps our law enforcement safe. I believe in voluntary. Nobody here can force you to sell anything. I just think that we need to really take a look at who we are as a society, and do we want to be anarchists and have guns, marching down our streets, or do we want to have some common sense regulations that just look at what's going on around us?
Okay. The next question indicates the questioner believes we've talked a lot about what things would be changed, what you think needs to be changed. What do you see that is working well and would require little change?
Oh, that is a very profound question. When we talk about what's working, I think what's working is our neighborhoods, our society, our people. We have this amazing ability to help our neighbors. And I think when we invest in that, in a grand scheme of things, we're talking about police forces, so that's what's first on my mind. When we invest in neighborhood policing, when we invest in community policing, when we invest in community resources, that shows really great dividends. The fact of the matter is we live in a big country in a very complicated society, and it means that I think that everything needs a lot of work because we can't rest on our laurels. We have to keep moving towards making everything better. So even when things are functioning, I think that they can always be made better. So I know that's a little bit of a cop out on that front, but we can always keep trying to make things better.
Okay. The next question asks for your comments on President Trump's stated plan to withdraw the United States from the WHO by July of 2021.
Wow, that I think is a very dangerous idea and a very, very bad plan. First of all, we are in the middle of a global pandemic. If we cannot coordinate upon this in a global fashion, and that's what that organization is designed to do, we are going to create ourselves as an outlier and stop our ability to be invested in this as a global solution. Because this is truly one of those instances that no man or no country is an island, because the way our society works, there's no way that we can cut ourselves off from the rest of the world. So if we don't engage with the WHO, we are going to find ourselves behind. The other thing too is, let's talk about ourselves. I believe in America as a world leader. I believe in the America that is the light on the hill, that should be the front runner and the way of encouraging others in the world. I believe that we should be in the front of all of this and going to the WHO and saying, let's work on this together. Let's be in the front of this. And I think that by extracting ourselves from these global organizations, we are ceding our role as a global leader.
Okay. The next question asks whether you support mail-in ballots in light of the fact that we are seeing absentee voting and early voting reaching historic levels.
I think it's a fabulous way to allow everybody to have the right to vote. The fact of the matter is, it is our most basic constitutional right. And I think that the more we can do to make it accessible, not just theoretically available, but accessible to everybody is important. Ohio has had no excuse absentee balloting for years and years and years. We have shown that there is minimal risk in doing so. We find ourselves in a bit of a conundrum now with a lot of attacks on our post office that has reduced the capacity of the post office to deal with it. We need to go back and invest in our post office and get our automatic sorting machines back in, but that's obviously something that we're not going to fix in the next 6 days. Right now, today, I would suggest that if you have a ballot that is a mail-in ballot, to take it directly to the Board of Elections and put it in the drop box, because we have seen with the intentional degrading of our post office that the delays in the capacity are reduced. But if that is the only way you can safely get your ballot to the Board of Elections, put it in the mail. It is the most basic right of every American, and we should make it as easy for everybody to vote as possible.
Okay, the next question asks for your highest priority in repairing foreign relationships, especially with our allies.
That is a great question. We need to invest again in our diplomatic corps. We have been stripping away finances for diplomacy. We have been turning it into a way of rewarding political allies. We need to get people who understand these very, very complex global relationships back onto the front lines of our country. We need to go out there and make sure that people understand we believe in our country as a nation of laws. We believe that no one is above the laws. We believe that we're not going to be tearing up our treaties with our allies every 4 years when we turn over a new president. We need to get back to being that reliable part of the world, and that means investing in diplomacy. It means getting those career diplomats who understand the nuance and complexity back into to engaging, and it means using diplomacy as our first resort as opposed to our military.
Okay. Next question asks for you to identify a book you've read recently that was informative and important.
Oh, goodness. I have to admit, I have been a little off of my clubs lately just because of the pace of running for office. I am going to go with Becoming by Michelle Obama. Whether or not you agree with everything that she says politically, it is a very interesting look into being a woman in the public eye and about being strong and being able to really project who you are and what you believe in.
Okay. Next question. How would you go about restoring the civil service? I think this question again is directed at foreign service and the diplomatic corps.
It's like, oh, I'm sorry, I see Mimi shaking her head. Unmute yourself, my friend.
Mimi, go ahead. If I misstated the question. Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, on
So I was referring to the recent initiative of Donald Trump in issuing a presidential executive order that basically deep sixes the civil service. And we've had professional civil service in most of our public agencies where you require long-term technical expertise and apolitical commitment to doing the job. And he is attempting to disestablish it.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've kind of already hit the nail on the head there. The fact is the civil service is the gears that keep our country going. If we did not have people who work in the government as a career, we would have to figure out every 2-4 years how to reinvent the wheel. And that is just asking for everything in our country to come to a screeching halt. There is a reason we have civil service. There is a reason why they have been historically apolitical, and that is because we need the gears to keep going. So I think we need to find legislation that redefines the limits of what executive orders are. I mean that even on the standpoint of when President Obama was writing executive orders, I think that it's a very, very dangerous way to run our country. It's not what was intended by our Constitution. It was not what was intended to go around the legislative process, even when it's not working in your favor. So I think that on two sides of that, we need to address how executive orders can be used in the world, and we also are in the country, and we also need to make sure that the machinery that keeps our country running is apolitical and protected from political meddling.
Next question. What are your views on term limits?
You know, term limits sound like a really great thing when it starts off, because I know that I'm looking at some of the career politicians that are in Washington that have been squatting on a seat for 20 years and have no hope of getting rid of them. But studies show that in states like Ohio that have term limits, you actually see bad things happen from that. You see, despite the fact that there's term limits and hopefully less of an incentive to be overly political, you see constituent services go down when you have political term limits, and yet you still see the politicians spending exactly as much time raising money and dealing with the corporate PACs and everything else like that. To me, the solution here is an end to gerrymandering. So when we let the people select their politicians instead of the politicians select their voting pool, we have it built into our system that we have term limits because you get voted out. So when we have even districts that are there to represent the people, it's the win-win situation to me.
Question, Congress for many years has had a practice of essentially delegating its legislative role to regulatory bodies and relying on those bodies to do what Congress itself should have done. What's your view on that issue?
So I think that I've got a little bit of a pushback on some of that. Congress, to a very real extent, has abdicated its responsibility to draft legislation to corporate PACs. Instead of having them drafted in-house, they get special interests who draft the legislation and hand it over to congressional members who then present it. So I think once we start getting dirty money out of politics, we're going to start pushing back on that process. When it comes to getting agencies to come up with ideas, this I think is a better route to it. We have the experts, we have the people who work in a field for the career being able to say, this is what I see the issue is. For example, when we talk about clean water, I'm an aerospace engineer. I can understand a lot of things about rockets. I don't necessarily understand how our water systems work. So I want somebody who has invested their entire career in studying the makeup of our lake come to me and say, this is what's going wrong with our lake, and this is how we as scientists see the best way to fix it. So I think by getting that input and then once again, taking back the role of Congress as being the drafters of legislation from special interests and dark money, I think we're going to get a much better system going forward.
Okay. And it looks like we're going to have time for one more question, and that would be, how do you plan to go about pursuing campaign finance reform?
A lot of it is practicing what I preach on this front. Like I said, don't accept corporate PAC money. I don't answer to corporate interests. And I am very much in favor of legislation like HR 1 that was passed by this Congress, which takes a lot of that dark money out of politics. I do believe up to and including a constitutional amendment that overturns the Citizens United decision, which opened the floodgates to dark and dirty money. We've seen in the last 10 years that has been the law of the land, just being open season on money in politics. And so I am up to and including a constitutional amendment against Citizens United.
Okay. We're at 8:26. So in order to keep our meeting to an hour, I'm going to wrap up the questions for this session. Anyone who has questions, I would encourage you to send the question to Ms. Mueri on her website. I'm certain that she would be happy to answer it if I can speak for you. And with that, again, thank you very much for joining us and for being so candid in your responses to questions. President Marilyn, I will turn the meeting back over to you.
Thank you, David. And again, today concludes our candidates forum. What a great job David's done putting this all together. Again, a great job. Next week on November 4th, we will have a friend of our Rotary Club speak to us, Dr. Genevieve Agulu, BBS, PhD, and spouse of our own Chuck Nabufi. Genevieve is in her second year of a postdoctoral program with the Infectious Disease Internal Medicine Department of Yale School of Medicine. Her program advisor is Dr. Syed Omar, a vaccinologist and an infectious disease epidemiologist and the inaugural director of the Yale Institute for Global Health. You may have seen him recently on CNN. Genevieve will be speaking about the creation of the COVID vaccine and the safety precautions and the procedures that are required. We now have 3 states that have indicated that they will be seeking separate verification of vaccines of the safety before they will authorize implementation. She will also share some of her current research into the monitoring of the spread of COVID within the Yale health systems. She's been working from home since the spring, but reveals that she's busier than ever. And so thank goodness for the internet. We're getting very close to our close today, and so I will close as I usually do, looking back at this day in history. In 1636, Harvard College was founded in Massachusetts. In 1886, the Statue of Liberty was dedicated in New York Harbor by President Cleveland. The statue weighs 225 tons, is 152 feet tall, and was originally known as Liberty, enlightening the world. It was a gift from the people of France. In 1904, the St. Louis Police Department became the very first to use fingerprinting. And then lastly, in 1949, U.S. President Harry Truman swore in Helen Eugenie Moore Anderson as the first U.S. ambassador to Denmark. Anderson was the first woman to hold a post as an ambassador. So live on and have a great day. Thank you so much for your great participation today. This was a wonderful meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you again for joining us, Ms. Mueri.
It's truly my honor. Thank you so much.
I think we threw the kitchen sink at you.